A couple more coming in, but I think we can go ahead and get started. Mr. Jenson Button, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. We really appreciate your time. Obviously a busy couple of weeks for you coming off of Garage 56 at Le Mans, and now looking ahead to next weekend, making your second NASCAR Cup Series start at the Chicago Street Course. Can you just give us an overview, of what this month has been like from the driver's seat, from your perspective?
It's been a busy month. With lots of different things going on, but the one thing that's is most important to me is driving a racing car when it comes to work. So that's never going to leave. Lucky enough, I'm in a position where I can go and do certain types of racing for fun. And racing at Le Mans is something I've always wanted to do. I raced there in 2018, but to go back in a stock car was pretty awesome. It was one of the best weekends, I would say, of my best racing weekends of my career. I think one, because it was so relaxed, but two, because it was just utterly nuts. For us to be able to race a stock car at Le Mans against the GTs, the prototypes, it was a really, really special, I say weekend. I think it felt like I was there for a month, but I think it was 12 days I was at Le Mans for. But such a reception from drivers, teams, from the fans. I think we've put on an amazing show for NASCAR. I think that we definitely have a lot more fans that will be tuning in, especially for Chicago, I think.
Well, fantastic. We're going to go ahead into questions for you now from the media. We will kick things off with Dustin Long. Go ahead, Dustin. And just a reminder to the media, if you do have a question for Jenson, please raise your hand within the Zoom platform, as I see a lot of you have. And we're going to try to get to as many questions in the time that we have with Jenson. Go ahead with your question, Dustin.
Thank you. Hey, Jenson, I'm just curious, after what you experienced at Le Mans, obviously NASCAR is looking to try to grow internationally, and I'm just trying to get a sense of where this goes from this point on. I almost wonder if this is kind of like what soccer was in the United States, that there were certainly some seminal moments, but it still took a lot of time before soccer really became closer and closer to mainstream. What are the challenges that are going to be for NASCAR, and how does it move forward from this experience at Le Mans?
Yeah, well, I can definitely tell you the positives and why I think people loved seeing the car at Le Mans. One, because it was a standout, and I don't think they ever expected a NASCAR style car to race at Le Mans. But for me, it was the sound of it. The sound blew everyone away. A meaty V8. When you passed people in certain corners, they would be cheering. Every time I was behind the safety car, I would go around the track waving at the fans, and the uproar when the car went past. So I think it's like that childhood sort of love for it. That the picture on the wall of having, for me, it was a Ferrari F40, but having a cool car on the wall that makes you smile. And I think the Cup car definitely did that at Le Mans. It was a car that got people smiling and made them feel like a kid again, hearing this gigantic V8 and the look of the car, and then they look at the lap time as well, and they're like, oh, it's quick as well. But I don't think lap times really matter. I think it's more about the presence of the car and the sound of the car that got people interested. And this is one car going round. It's not the action-packed races that we're used to seeing in Cup. I think that if you can get a fan base in Europe, they will love that. Within reason, I think there are certain things that the European fan base will struggle with. And I think the big one is the no rules in terms of how aggressive you can be out on track. I think that's one thing that takes all of us that get into racing in any category in NASCAR. We struggle with that initially because it's completely different to any other type of racing, where in other racing, if you tap a guy, you're probably going to get a penalty or damage your car, whereas in NASCAR, that's not the case. you can hit people, and it's down to the other guy either to retaliate or to move out of the way. So that's the biggest thing, I think, for the European public to get their head around.
And also, real quickly, is just I know you're running in Chicago, and just obviously that's going to be a big event for NASCAR, first time at a street course. Just the idea of racing at a street course with that type of car, all those cars out on that track, and just kind of what chaos or what you expect.
Yeah, I mean, every street course I've done and whatever I've raced in has been tight and twisty, and it is what it is. You deal with it. You know, when you look at IndyCar, they raced in Detroit, which is the tightest track I've ever seen. But it was a great race. So I think that we can put on a great show, and that's what I think that's what this race is going to it's going to be about, really. It's going to be a big learning curve for everyone. There's no room for error. You can't dive into corners, make a mistake, and then next lap round take it a little bit easier because you'll be in the wall with a damaged car. So I think in terms of what the teams and drivers do over the race weekend, it's going to be very different to normal. It's going to really be building up to a good lap time. And come the race, yeah, we can't drive like we did at Koto because none of us will get around turn one. So I think there needs to be a bit more respect for the circuit as well as the other cars.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Jordan Bianchi. Go ahead with your question, Jordan.
Hey, appreciate the time, Jenson. Kind of following up Dustin's question a little bit. Have you spent much time, in the simulator for the Chicago Street Course? And if you have, what your impressions are of the circuit?
No, I've only driven on iRacing so far, but in about an hour and a half, I have a 4-hour simulator session. So I could tell you a little bit more after that, but we won't be talking then. But I have 2 days in the sim before the race. One, to get my eye in, to understand the circuit, to understand where the circuit goes, the bumpiness of the circuit, but also to work on setup because, I think that there's a lot that can be done with setup to get a car that really works for a street circuit that gives you confidence rather than just trying to find lap time in efficiency. I think it's more getting the car to a place where where I feel confident with it that I can push it harder.
All right, next we'll go to Bob Pockris. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, Jenson, can you kind of compare or have an idea what it will compare doing the Chicago Street Course as far as the cool factor versus Le Mans?
Oh, I mean, it's so different. One thing that I really loved at Le Mans is that we were racing with prototypes. And we overtook a couple as well. But I think racing in a city, I think it's probably the first time I've raced in an actual city in a racing car. Monaco is a principality, but I wouldn't class it as a city. But I think this will bring in definitely a different fan base. I know that true NASCAR fans might think it's a bit of an unusual type of track and why are we bothering? But why not? I think it's great that they're willing to, try something different. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it's one race on the calendar, and I love that we're, trying new things. Just like taking a stock car to Le Mans. Amazing! What a great opportunity, and I think it brought in a very different fan base, and I think this could do something very similar.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Kelly Crandall. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thanks, Sam. Hey, Jenson, looking back at COTA, your first start in the Cup Series, you said afterwards it was an emotional roller coaster with everything you went through that day. What are you expecting at Chicago? Not necessarily the course, as you've talked about, but just getting back into a Cup car and just how maybe better off prepared you'll be this time.
Yeah, definitely better prepared. I've just had a seat fit and all looks good. I struggled with, as you probably knew, but I had heat exhaustion in the race. But now I won't have any issues at all. So we've come up with a lot of solutions that are going to make it a lot easier for me. And in terms of the car, getting used to the car, yeah, the first few laps will, I'll be finding my feet, if you like. You know, having driven the car that I drove at Le Mans, it has traction control, and you know, it's a lot more compliant, a lot easier to drive. This is definitely a lot more edgy. So it will take me a few laps, but I think while everyone else is still learning the track, it's not a bad thing at all. And as I said, for me to find a setup that works and is a drivable setup that gives me confidence is what we're aiming to do over the 2 simulator days before we actually get to the track. So we're fully prepared.
Were there things in COTA that were the biggest struggle for you, maybe just behind the wheel or adjusting to, that you feel like now you'll be, as I said, more prepared for now that you understand it?
I think the big thing was how low they try and run the cars. You know, I'm used to massive downforce on cars, and you have a range of where you put the rear of the car for the diffuser to work at its best. Well, with the Cup car, basically the car has to be on the ground for the diffuser to work properly, which takes away all of your compliance and suspension. So in high-speed corners, it was completely the opposite of what I thought a Cup car would be. You know, I thought it'd be very gradual, the slide, and it would be easy to slide, and you could slide. But with this car, it's the opposite. You know, you get to a point where the rear just gives up and the rear tire shudders, and you're just fighting a lost cause, really. So that was my biggest issue, and it meant that I couldn't push the car as hard as I would like, because it was like a cliff, the feeling of grip than no grip. So that's something I know more now, but it's something I want to try and work my way around to find a better direction. So I still think there is a better option for a circuit like Chicago. And the other one was just the racing. You know, you can get used to a racing car. In one category, you can get used to any car out there. It just takes you a bit of time. The racing is something that takes a bit longer, just the style of racing, the aggression, and spotters. You know, I think that I was lucky enough to have some great spotters that were very helpful, and I didn't realize how important they were going to be. So again, having been through all that once, going into Chicago, I'll arrive a lot more confident.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Jim Utter. Go ahead with your question, Jim.
Hey, Jenson, I was just wondering, I don't know what kind of expectations about the whole NASCAR experience you had when you first started, but when you look back at COTA and then your sort of representation of NASCAR at Le Mans, what has your participation in the sort of NASCAR experience been like, and has it sort of in any way raised your anticipation in going forward doing the additional races?
Good question. I think for half the race at COTA, I thought this I don't want to do this again. But the other half of the race, I thought this is awesome. This is just awesome. You know, in terms of the racing, the wheel-to-wheel action, not giving an inch, and I definitely enjoyed that. And that's something you do miss in single seaters, especially in Formula One, because the amount of downforce you have, there isn't so much wheel-to-wheel action. I felt that I had more wheel-to-wheel action on the first lap of the race in COTA than I do in a whole Grand Prix. So lots of emotions, positive and negative from COTA. Does it make me want to do more? Yeah, I mean, road courses, yes. Ovals, I would love to try an oval one day, but you know, it's another world. You know, these guys have driven ovals since they were 5-6 years old. So why would I be good at it? I don't know. It's a possibility, but it's a lot of work, and it's already enough getting used to driving such a big car for me, and the style of racing is a big step as well. So maybe one day, but you know, I'm very happy and very lucky to be doing the 3 races I'm doing this year, and looking forward to Chicago, and then obviously Indy a few weeks' time after that.
And in terms of Chicago, do you feel at all that you may be on a little bit more of an equal footing, considering no one else in the series will not actually be on the track until the day of your first practice?
Definitely helps. There are a few guys in the field that have raced on street circuits before. There's some very quick guys that have raced on street circuits before. So yeah, it's easier for me than COTA. And COTA, I feel that I'm just not used to using that much of a circuit. I normally drive within the white lines, and at COTA, if you make a mistake, you just run wide, come back on, and you don't really lose much time. So it's, again, a very different way of driving. So yeah, Chicago should be better for me. So yeah, I feel confident that I can have a better result, but it could also all end at turn one. So it doesn't matter how quick you are. You need to also have a little bit of luck on your side.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Next, we'll go to Trey Downey. Go ahead, Trey.
Hey, Jenson, after experiencing COTA and the aggression level, do you think that you'll be more comfortable at Chicago yourself being more aggressive?
Yeah, definitely. But I think everyone will tone it down a little bit. I watched Sonoma, and it definitely shows that it's circuit dependent. COTA is always going to be a tricky one because you head up to turn one and it's so wide on the entry, and then it's very narrow. And that whole section, you can stay side by side all the way down to turn 10. Whereas at Sonoma, it was a very different type of race. It was more of a, it felt more what I'm used to when I watched the race at Sonoma. And I think Chicago will be something similar because we all know that you can't just run wide, come back on.
You're in kind of shape over at Royal Ascot and first.
Hey, just a reminder, please keep yourself muted and unmute yourself when you ask a question.
Tell me more.
Okay, I'm gonna try to find out who this is and I can mute them.
Right.
Sorry.
100%. So I do think that the racing will be a little bit calmer in Chicago. And it, if not in the first start, when the blocked, suddenly people will start backing up a little bit and being a bit more respectful of the circuit, I think. And that's the big thing with the street circuit. People will learn very quickly. There needs to be a bit of respect there.
And then if NASCAR were able to secure a date and race overseas in Europe, do you think that there's a potential there for a similar boom to what F1 has realized here in the US?
Yeah, there's obviously been a lot of reasons why F1 had the boom. I think coming out of COVID, Formula One, people wanted to get out to events, and Formula One was one of those events that people were very excited about. It also helped that the Netflix series Behind the Scenes. I think here in America we love behind the scenes. We like seeing the individuals that are actually competing and a bit of controversy, and you definitely got that on the TV show, and that's a big part of it. So, racing is one thing. I think understanding the personalities that are in the sport is something that I think the European fans would want to know. Just seeing 39 cars drive around is great, but if you don't know who's behind the wheel, you've got no one to really support unless you just like the color of the car like my son does. So I think there needs to be a way of the European fans understanding the personalities within the sport as much as enjoying the racing. But yeah, I think it could be big, and I think doing a race next year in Europe would be great. You got to jump on what we did at Le Mans, and I think it had such a big following. I saw so many memes. I saw, went crazy on social media that it can be easily forgotten. So I think it needs to be jumped on as soon as possible, and a race in Europe would be great.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Stephen Toronto. Go ahead, Stephen.
Jenson, I don't think we've gotten the opportunity to ask you about this yet, but another Formula One driver who you've raced against, Kamui Kobayashi, is going to be making his Cup debut in Indianapolis. Can you just talk a little bit about Kobayashi and what we might expect from him?
Yeah, Kamui's chosen a good race to start. I mean, if he started in Chicago, that would have been interesting. He's definitely going to get a shock from anything he's ever driven. It's a big learning curve. I know he's willing to learn. He's very excited by it. He says that it was a dream since he was a kid to race in in Cup. So I look forward to racing with it. You know, I've raced with Kamui for many years. You know, when I won the World Championship in 2009 in Brazil, I had to overtake him to win the World Championship. So yeah, we've raced together in F1. We've raced together in endurance in WEC. We've also raced together in Japan in Super GT. He came and did a race there. So yeah, I really look forward to his involvement. I think it's great for the sport. Another international driver and a guy that has such a high profile in endurance racing with Toyota, ex F1 driver, and Kamui is quite an aggressive driver, so I think he's going to fit in well in the Cup Series. But he's still going to be a big shock to him. But I look forward to seeing how he performs.
Gotcha. Thank you, Jenson.
Next, we'll go to Jerry Jordan. Go ahead, Jerry.
Hey, Jenson, I want to go back to Le Mans real quick and talk about the innovation aspect of what y'all were trying to learn there. And one of those was with the tires. And when Jimmy went down the Dunlop Hill in the middle of the rain and made the corner with one of the Toyota hypercars on the outside, just talk about the tires. What you guys learned or what y'all talked about from leaving that race and knowing what may be able to be used in NASCAR going down the road, and what was going on, internally about that learning experience.
Yeah, the wet weather was always going to be difficult for us. We did a lot of testing in the dry on different types of circuit, COTA, Sebring, Daytona. So we're able to really work closely with Goodyear to produce a tire that worked for us. But the wet was something very different. I didn't really get much testing. And as you know, no NASCAR categories really race in the wet. So there's not been that much experience with this technology. The technology in NASCAR and the technology in endurance racing is very different. In NASCAR, you have a fabric belt in the tire. In endurance racing and in F1, you have metal, like a metal belt in the tire. So it works in a very different way. And a NASCAR tire will overheat within a few corners, and then it slides around quite a lot on the surface, which works in NASCAR. But when you try and apply a wet tread to that, it makes it very difficult. And it's very easy to overheat the tires. And as soon as they're overheated and the blocks move around, makes it very tricky because they degrade very quickly. So the wet's tricky. The dry tires, yes, we definitely made some good improvements that could be interesting. For Cup, we obviously had a wider rear tire, which would also be interesting to see if that would work in Cup as well.
And one more, you said that NASCAR needs to jump on the momentum from Le Mans, and I was there and talked to a lot of fans, and everyone seemed to really like the buzz, and as you said, the sound of the car. Where would be a good place to make that happen? Where would be a good place to have a race if NASCAR was going that route?
I kind of feel like, I'm not sure it's what NASCAR would want to do, but I kind of feel like it would be good to jump on a weekend where there's another race. So whether it's an F1 weekend, which is unlikely, or a WEC weekend, endurance weekend, because you have a big fan base there already, and it would be a good starting point for future races in Europe.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Matt Weaver. Go ahead, Matt.
Actually, Jerry just asked my question, so I'm good. Thank you.
All right. We'll go next to Ben Johnston. Go ahead, Ben.
Excellent. Thanks, man. Hey, Jenson, can you discuss what the difference is between racing an F1 car to what you're going to experience in the Cup car on a street circuit?
Yeah, I mean, in an F1 car, you throw all the downforce at it. In F1, you're really working with efficiency with downforce. So you might not put a certain gurney flap on most tracks because the straight line speed's down. But on a street circuit, you don't care about efficiency. You just throw as much downforce on as you can. The problem with a Cup car, we don't have a lot of downforce. And the downforce you do have the only way you get it is to run the car on the floor. And on a street circuit, you can't do that because it's bumpy. And you're hitting the ground, you're hitting the bump stops. So kind of in a tricky situation. So there's a lot of setup work that needs to be done for Chicago. And I think you'll see big differences up and down the grid in terms of performance and how the cars look and handle on track because of that. So I would say it's easier for F1 going to a track because they understand their aero package, whereas we're limited here in Cup. And as I said, the way we get downforce is to run the car low. So yeah, it's going to be a tricky weekend, but it's an exciting challenge. It's something I'm very much looking forward to.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Next, we'll go to David Hoffman. Go ahead, David.
Hey, thanks for taking the time, Jenson. Just looking back at Le Mans, it's been able to set in more. Just what's a memory from that experience that's kind of stuck out to you that will stay with you for a long time?
Overtaking an LMP2 car. I mean, it was just an amazing experience, you know. First, the car was great to drive. You know, it was easy to drive, which is what you need around a place like Le Mans. You know, when you're doing a 3.5 hour stint in the car, you need it to be relatively easy to drive, and it was. But for me, it was the roar, it was the sound, it was, you know, overtaking GT cars. And you know, there was certain place on the course, like at a Tetra Rouge, which is onto the first part of Mulsanne, that LMP2 cars would try and overtake us. And if they got it wrong and they pulled out too early, they'd pull alongside us, and then we would drag past them again down the straight. And I never thought I would see that, a NASCAR out dragging an LMP2 car down the straight. So I loved it. It made me smile a lot out on track. I'm sure it annoyed a lot of drivers out there, but that's what made me smile even more. So it was the sheer aggressiveness of our car, but also the performance of it surprised a lot of people. But the whole thing was about bringing more fans to NASCAR, and I think that's what we did, and it definitely put a smile on a lot of fans' faces, and that was what was lovely to see.
Thank you, Jenson.
Next, we'll go to Chris Perkins. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, thank you so much. A lot of drivers, Jenson, of your ilk don't take this multidisciplinary approach, like go into other series, try the things. Why do you think that's important? And why do you think other drivers don't sort of do what you do?
I think because it's uncomfortable. You know, they've found their route that works for them, and something they're confident in and they're very good at. And they don't want to try something else because they might not be as competitive, and they're worried about, you know, losing that, I don't know, worried about what people think about them, you know, if they're not competitive in a Cup car. I wasn't so competitive in a Cup car, but, you know, for me, it's all about the learning. It's all about the challenge of improving. And I think a lot of drivers that are at the top level of one category, they're worried about stepping out of their comfort zone, trying something new and not being as competitive. Whereas for me, I feel I've got nothing to lose. You know, I've won the World Championship in F1. It's what I set out to do. Now I'm going racing because I love racing, and I love learning new things. And those challenges are what keep me going. Otherwise, I wouldn't be racing anymore. You know, a few have, you know, Fernando Alonso is the big one. Obviously jumped into Le Mans, jumped into racing in Daytona 24 Hours. But those are kind of categories that are similar to Formula One. They're high downforce. I would love to see more drivers jumping in a NASCAR and especially in the Cup Series, because it is so competitive. And that's why I really enjoyed racing against Kimi Raikkonen. I'm so happy that Kamui's racing. But I would really like to see more drivers from the endurance world or F1 world coming to have a taste of NASCAR and seeing how competitive it is. Because, you know, I never thought it'd be as competitive as it is. I knew ovals would be something different altogether, but I didn't think the drivers would be so good on street courses, road courses. So pleasantly surprised.
Thank you so much.
Next, we'll go to Sam Hall. Go ahead, Sam.
Cheers, thanks. Hi, Jenson. How much of a shock do you think it's going to be getting back up after having all this time spent in the Le Mans iteration of a NASCAR?
Yeah, there's certain things because it feels when you're in the car, it feels identical. When you're sat in the seats the same. When you look out over the dash, it's the same. But then you don't have paddles on the steering wheel. You have a giant stick to pull on, and then you've got to blip the throttle on the downshifts. You've got to lift off the throttle on the upshift. So yeah, it's going to take a little while, and then obviously traction control, which saves you if you get in a tricky situation in the Garage 56 car. But I'll get used to it pretty quick. I did the last time, so yeah, not to worry. I mean, when I started driving in the Garage 56 car, I hadn't driven a racing car for 2.5 years, so I was able to get used to such a big, heavy car reasonably quickly. So I have no worries of jumping back in.
Cheers. And if I can, I'm just going to try and sneak a sneaky F1 question in here. Obviously, Checo Perez, difficult time at Red Bull. Helmut Marko's infamously quick to swing the axe on a driver. How much danger do you think he's in at Red Bull at the moment?
Well, I don't think he is for this year, but end of the year, who knows? Who'd you put in there? I mean, it's a tricky one. Obviously, they have Daniel Ricciardo there as an ambassador, but I don't know if they're willing to put him in that seat. Do they take someone from AlphaTauri? If so, who would it be? De Vries hasn't really been as competitive as they thought. And would you put Tsunoda in the A team? It's a tricky one for them. But yeah, I got a feel for Checo. 3 races on the bounce, he's been below par, and that's tough. When Max sees his teammate have a tough weekend, it just helps his confidence. 3 weekends, there's no catching Max now. He's gone. The championship is definitely his. What happens to Checo? Hopefully he bounces back. We all want people to take it to Max. We want to see good racing from Checo. He's quick. He's really quick. It's just the inconsistency that definitely hurts him.
All right, we'll take our next question from Marty Sikla. Go ahead, Marty.
Thanks, Sam and Jenson. Appreciate you taking some time. I apologize if you already asked this, but is there a track when you've been prepping for Chicago, is there a track that's a little bit similar to it that you've had past experience on, whether raced in F1 or in sports cars?
Not really. Not really. I mean, you could look at other street circuits and compare. Obviously, Monaco is very different. I feel Monaco's tighter, much tighter than Chicago. No, I mean, there's a lot more street circuits in America that probably are similar. I think maybe the Detroit track for IndyCar. I do feel that Detroit was even bumpier than what we're going to find, I hope so anyway. But no, I mean, I don't really know what I would compare it to. Macau, maybe, but Macau has big, long straights and fast sweeping corners, whereas Chicago doesn't so much. So, no, I would say it's more of a standalone. I think the big thing is also the bridges. There's 2 bridges that we go over, which is going to be the trickiest situation because we're braking as we go over those bridges. So the rear end's going to be going light. So people are going to be brave if they try and overtake there. But those are overtaking zones, I would say.
Thank you very much. Best of luck in Chicago.
Cheers. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Francisco with D Sports.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Very nice to meet you. I'm Francisco Oro from Argentina for D Sports, Latin American TV channel. Jenson, my question is, you are nowadays taking sort of one-off appearances. You did it with the Le Mans. You did it previously with Extreme E leading your team. You did it with NASCAR previously, now back in Chicago. My question is, do you feel interested or close to trying a full season in any series? If it is, please tell us why. And if it's not, is there anyone that you would say, I would be closer to this one than the other one, and why?
Good question. Yes, I have jumped around doing lots of different things over the years. I also raced in GTs in 2020. I did one race in the UK, GT3, and Rallycross. So yeah, basically because I've always wanted to race in those series. So I've been very lucky that I've been able to jump into certain cars here and there and race. I didn't think that I would want to do a full season again because of how busy the schedule always is. But I feel that I'll be racing in something next year, doing a full season. It's great doing one-off races, but you don't get the best out of yourself. And that's why for me, doing 3 races here in Cup has been really good. Because I get to spend time with the team. I get to spend more time in the simulator and really working with my engineer, crew chief, to develop the skills between us and to have a good understanding. So yes, I want to do a full season next year, time permitting. I need to balance a few things, as I've been very busy this year. But it will be endurance racing, which will be either IMSA or WEC.
Thank you for that. If you allow me just a little question, I've interviewed about the behind the scenes in Le Mans. We have recently in our TV news show, we have interviewed the GT winner Nicolas Varrone from our country, and he told us some nice moments and memories from the behind the scenes, as all the GM, General Motors related teams shared a hospitality. All the drivers from the Garage 56, from the Corvettes and the Cadillacs in the hypercar class share loads of moments together. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, that's why I love endurance racing. You know, it's such an emotional weekend, you know, endurance, especially a 24-hour race, because the mechanics, the engineers, they're not just awake for 24 hours. It's 36 hours really. So that experience is very special, and to share it with, as you said, such a big team of people was very cool. Lots of fun stories, and lots of emotion, whether you win, lose, you know, crash, retire, finish, whatever it is. When you cross the finish line or the clock stops, you know, that moment with everyone is really special. And that's what I love about racing right now. It's that team atmosphere that you've worked together to achieve greatness, and that's why I miss having been away from motor racing for a couple of years.
Thank you so much, Jenson. Thank you, everyone.
All right, and we will take our final question from Charles Bradley. Go ahead with your question.
Hey, Jenson. Obviously, after Le Mans, Jim France, Rick Hendrick, John Doonan, you know, really important figures in American motorsports, were delighted with the way it went. Did you feel that love personally? And do you think that's something that you could maybe leverage when you're thinking about future opportunities? You mentioned wanting to do some IMSA stuff next year. Would you be keen on doing something in GTP?
Yeah, I would. And yeah, first of all, you know, big thanks to Jim and Rick for giving me the opportunity to race at Le Mans with them. You know, Jim is very passionate obviously about NASCAR, but he was very passionate about bringing NASCAR to the endurance world. He was at most of our tests as well, and to see the smile on his face and the excitement every time the car passed, it really shows that he's really passionate about his racing. And I don't think the weekend could have gone any better. You know, Jim was very happy. As I said, he was awake for most of the race, so that experience of sharing that emotion together was pretty awesome. But yeah, who knows what could happen in the future, whether it's WEC, IMSA, or maybe some more NASCAR race in the future. I don't know, but yeah, I'll definitely be leaning on Jim maybe a little bit for that.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jenson, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it. Good luck next weekend at the Chicago Street Course.
Thank you, guys. Hopefully we can put on a good show.